What is going on, everyone? Good morning. I know what some of you might be thinking to yourself. No, I'm not Pastor Rob. I'm much younger. I would like to think that I'm not necessarily as good looking, but up there. But you might be thinking to yourself, okay, why are all these young kids everywhere? Like you're seeing youth students everywhere, at every door, up on the worship team, and you're thinking, where did all these kids come from? Well, for those of you, if this is your first time, or if you haven't heard, today is Youth Takeover. This is an amazing opportunity where our youth students get the opportunity to serve all of you, to serve the rest of the church. And it's also a great opportunity for the rest of the church to be able to see what our youth is like. And so it's a really, really exciting opportunity. We get to show you a little bit of what a youth service looks like. And some of you are probably thinking, well, I've already kind of got my fill of youth service because we've been in here as our auditorium has been getting remodeled. And I'm telling you, it looks amazing. We're getting so excited. It's incredible. But maybe you think, I've already got my fill of youth service. I've been in here. Well, yeah, we do have youth service in here, but this is only the building. But those faces at every door, those faces that are walking around and up on stage, that's the people. Those are our youth students. And me and Pastor Riley are incredibly blessed that we have the opportunity to work with such amazing, amazing youth students. And I'm telling you, God is doing some incredible things in our lives. We're seeing God move in our youth. It's a very exciting time. Today's a very exciting day. But if I'm being completely honest, I'm excited for a whole nother reason. Yes, I'm excited about all those, but y'all, Thanksgiving is just a few days away. And that is my time to shine. Like, I'm a big man. That is like my day. A day filled with food and good tasting food, sign me up. Right? That's where I get to show up and show out. Like, that's me. If any of you have ever seen the show Friends, there's a character on the show. His name is Joey. And Joey's really funny. I feel like I relate to him in a lot of different ways. But one of the ways that I relate to him most is Joey is known for loving food. Now, I feel like I might love food maybe a little bit too much. Got to lose some weight. But I am like Joey. I love food. In fact, there's an episode where he's on a date with a girl, and she reaches over, takes a few of his fries, and he responds like any other rational adult would. And he yells at her and yells, "Joey doesn't share food." I relate to that because I don't like to share my food. I like my food. If you try and reach over across the table and steal something off my plate, that's a quick way to lose some fingers. You never mess with a big man's food. And so Thanksgiving is such an exciting day for me because, one, I just love the food, but I love the fellowship. I've been blessed to have a big family and a very connected family. But another blessing on top of that is just about everybody in my family knows how to cook. That's a real blessing. And they all cook extremely well, but there's just something, if I'm being completely honest, that just takes it to the next level. There's one thing that's just a step above everything else, especially on Thanksgiving. And I don't care if it sounds cliche. Don't take this as a personal attack, but it's my grandma's apple pie. And I know everybody says that their grandma makes the best apple pie. I'm going to be one of those people. If there's a competition, my grandma's in the running. And that's because she makes it from scratch. Like, she makes her own crust, and it's flaky, and it's crisp, and it's just, I get excited. About to have my mouth start watering up here because her pie is so good. It just hits, especially on Thanksgiving. But I have a problem. You see, sometimes, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I sit here and I'm like hanging out at my house. I just start to think to myself, I could go for something sweet right about now. And I think, well, piece of pie sounds pretty good. My grandma's apple pie sounds pretty good right about now. But the problem is my grandma, she still lives in Tulsa. She's not down here. I don't really get the opportunity to see her very often. And so the opportunity to not only see her, but have that pie is very, very, very slim. And so then you're thinking, well, Mitchell, it's not that big of a deal. Just go make your own pie. I don't know how to do that. Look, I'm an okay baker. I'm not bad, but I'm nowhere near my grandma. And so if I make her recipe, it's just not gonna be the same, and I feel like I'm just gonna do it a disservice. So if I pull up a recipe online and I try and make everything from scratch, one of the ingredients, it might say like yeast. I don't know what yeast is. I don't know where yeast is at. I could spend 30 minutes in Walmart just searching every single aisle looking, nope. I don't know what yeast is. But here's the thing, I know it's good. I know it's in everything that tastes good, especially bread. So, if it's in so many things, you would think that it's in like a big container that I'd be able to be like, yep, it's right there. No. They put it in a little jar, and it could be on like 12 different aisles. Is it with the bread? Is it with the baking? Is it like I don't know where to go. So rather than spending all my time and all my sanity trying to look for random ingredients at Walmart, I think to myself, there's a better way to do this, Mitchell. There's another option, and I'm right. Because Braum's is just right up the road. And if you've never had a Braum's frozen apple pie, it's very good. It's not my grandma's level, but it's very good. And I think, you know what? That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna have that. And so I go right up the road to Braum's and I get that pie and I get home and I start thinking, yes, now I can finally have some pie. My sweet tooth will be satisfied. And I look at the baking directions and I get really hopeful, I get really excited. First thing I read says, bake at 425 for 15 minutes. Yes, 15 minutes for pie. I can wait 15 minutes for pie. I can live with that. And so I'm sitting here, I'm getting excited, mouth is starting to water. And then the hope dies a little bit. Because after I do that, I look at the next directions and it says, reduce temperature to 375 and bake for an additional 60 minutes. Now I have to wait an hour and 15. I don't want to do that. But I think to myself, you know what, Mitchell? It's pie. It's worth it. You can wait an hour and 15 minutes for pie. You've waited for other things. Pie's worth it. Just wait. So I do it. And then I look at the next direction, and then it says, let it rest after done cooking for another 1 to 2 hours. My hope is gone. My hope is diminished. I have to wait basically like over 3 hours for a pie, a frozen pie. Frozen meals are supposed to be convenient. They're supposed to be quick and easy. None of that is quick and easy. None of that is convenient. I might as well have gone to Walmart. And so I just get confused and I'm sitting here and I want you to understand my dilemma. Okay, so right here, this is where the hunger is. This is where I'm sitting here thinking, okay, pie sounds really good. Yes, let's do it. And then over here, this is where I actually have my pie. And this is where the enjoyment is. And yet I'm stuck right here in the middle. And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, I can wait, but I don't really want to wait that long. And it makes me just want to look at my oven and just yell at it and just be like, bake faster. Like I want to yell at my oven and just say, do it quicker. It's not this hard. It was frozen. Just heat it. And then I'm thinking, well, I started off at 425. Maybe I should just bump it back up. See if I can, reduce some time, get this baby cooking a little quicker. But that's not how it works. Now, some of you might be thinking, get a load of this guy. He's thinking that yelling at his oven's gonna make it any better. He's thinking that he can turn the temp up like it's magically gonna bake it faster and make it taste just as good. And it sounds ridiculous. Like I sound crazy, I sound almost absurd for thinking that. But how many of you realize that we act the exact same way with God? See, that box or my grandma, they might promise me a great tasting pie, but they don't start off by saying about how long I'm gonna have to wait. God's blessings and God's promises are a lot like that. Which brings me to the title of my sermon, Process After Promise. Let me explain. The first thing that we have to realize about God's promises is that it takes time. God's promises often have a process. Just like when you bake a pie, there is a process, whether it's frozen, whether you're making your own filling and crust, whatever it is, there are directions, there are steps, there is a process after the promise. And so you might think, well, I don't want my process to take very long, but let me tell you, the longer it takes, the better the pie. There's a difference between homemade and store-bought, because the longer the process, the better it tastes. And so today I'm going to go through several quick stories, and we'll have the scriptures where you guys can see them, and I encourage you to read them on your own time even deeper, because it's an incredible stories. We can learn so many things from them. But the first person that I want to talk about is David. You see, David's story is all about promise. And I'm going to try and go through these quickly. But you see, in 1 Samuel chapter 16, this is the moment where David was chosen as king when he was a teenager. Now, this is the same David that we've heard about, David and Goliath, and David being a man after God's own heart. This is him. And this is when he's a teenager. You see, he was just a shepherd boy, and he was overlooked by everyone, even his own family. Yet, God promises him the throne. And at this time, God had turned his back on King Saul, and he's choosing David. And so, throughout history, young kings are not hard to find. They're in so many different cultures. They're all throughout different generations. Young kings are fairly common. And so you'd think, okay, logically, God turned his back on the current king. He's anointed a new king that's young. That's not very crazy. That's not super different. So surely he's just going to take the throne at any moment. But that's not the case. The crazy part is that he didn't actually become king until some experts say between 15 to 20 years later. So during that gap, he wasn't serving at the right hand of the king, learning as much as he could in the palace. You see, before I was a youth pastor, I was an intern here. And I spent as much time as I could with Pastor Riley, with Pastor Rob, with Pastor Ryan, with Pastor Doug, because I wanted to learn what it takes to be a youth pastor. Now, there's still lots of things that I'm learning, and by the time I got my first youth pastor job, by no means was I an expert, but at least I had some familiarity. I kind of knew what I was getting myself into a little bit. And you would think that this is what happens with David, so it's a quick and easy transition of power, but no. You see, David, he spent those 15 to 20 years serving in obscurity, drawing near to God in the wilderness, running for his life. All the while, God was shaping him for the throne. But I'm sure there were times that he was wondering if he would ever actually become king. You see, he was anointed early, but he was appointed later. And I'm sure while he's sitting in those caves, I could just see him saying, God, was this a joke? Because if it is, I'm not laughing. God, do you remember that promise that you made to me at my father's house? Like, I was just hanging out in the pasture, and then you gave me this promise, and now I'm fearing for my life. God, is this ever going to happen? Have we changed plans? You see, just because I bought that frozen pie doesn't mean that it's actually ready to eat, even when it's finished cooking. So just because you've been called doesn't mean that it's ready. And just because you're ready doesn't mean that it's time. Just like David. David was called to be king. And I'm sure in that 15 to 20 years, he felt like he was ready at some point. But it wasn't God's time. You see, God uses the wilderness to prepare the warrior, and we have to hold on to that promise. The next idea we have to realize is that God's process is critical. Preparation in the waiting positions you for participation in the miracle. The next story I want to talk about is Moses. Moses' story starts off in Exodus chapter 2, and his story is a story built on passion. Moses is almost the opposite of David in some ways. Whereas David started in the wilderness and then went to the palace, Moses actually starts off in the palace and transitions to the wilderness. You see, whenever he was a child, there was a rule or a decree by the Pharaoh to kill the firstborn sons of the Israelite people. And so his mother tries to save his life, and she floats him down the river in a basket, and he eventually gets picked up by Pharaoh's daughter, and he grows up in the palace. And all was going great for him. He was living a lavish life until he found out his identity, and he found out who his people truly were. And in that moment, he had a righteous anger, a righteous passion to free his people. Moses saw the injustice. He saw the torture of his people, and in outrage, he let that fire consume him. And he wound up killing an Egyptian when he was 40 years old. And I'm sure he was thinking that this is going to spark something, that this could turn into a revolution, that this could be the path to deliver Israel. But it wasn't God's time. You see, he spent 40 years in the desert learning humility and exile before God called him at the burning bush. And he used Moses to free his people. Moses was called early, but he was sent at the right time. God doesn't waste time. He uses it to form you for what he's called you to do. Now, granted, at the time, Moses didn't know that God was calling him to free the people, but he knew that he had to free the people. He knew that there was something inside of him, but it wasn't God's time. When the pie is spending time in the oven, it's not just sitting under a light looking more appetizing. And if I tried to eat a frozen pie right out of the box, it would basically be impossible. Now, it's still a pie. It's a frozen pie, and it's still going to be a pie when it gets done baking, but it needs the right amount of time. If you take it out too soon, you're going to scald your mouth, and some of us have scars from blessings that we have tried to force before it's time. So another thing we have to realize is we can't rush the process. God's timing is perfect even when it feels slow to us. In Genesis chapter 12, we see a couple of the names of Abraham and Sarah. And their story is all about not rushing the process and realizing that the promise is going to take some time. You see, Abraham, this is the same Abraham that many of us grew up singing the song about. Father Abraham had many sons, and many sons had Father Abraham. Now at this time, Father Abraham had no sons, and no sons had Father Abraham. But you see, God had promised that he would make Abraham into a great nation. And that starts by having a son. And so when Abraham was 75 and his wife Sarah was 65, God promised a son. Now, I'm not going to ask y'all to raise hands, but I'm going to go on a pretty far limb here and say that those of you that are 65 or 75, you want nothing to do with another child. Like, you do not want to have a kid right now. But this is something that Abraham and Sarah have been begging for, that they've been wanting, that they've been having a desire for. And it took almost 25 years for them to finally have their son, Isaac. But in the waiting, Abraham started to think to himself, well, we aren't getting any younger. And God promised me that I would have a son, but maybe it wasn't meant to be with Sarah. And so he steps out. And he winds up conceiving a son with Sarah's servant. And the son's name was Ishmael. And this shows us as a reminder that rushing God's timing can create lifelong consequences. What Abraham didn't initially realize was that God's promises, they don't expire, but rather they mature in his timing. When I get my pie out of the oven and it's done cooking, technically I can eat it. We talked about this. Technically I can eat it, but if I eat it right out of the oven, I'm going to burn my mouth. I can really hurt myself. Sometimes the almost there season is actually the most dangerous season. How many of you realize that when you burn your mouth bad, food doesn't taste as good because you've burned off your taste buds? Impatience leads to lasting damage that often takes more time to get fixed. There's a reason a pie is supposed to rest. It cools and it finishes the proper way. And if I let my impatience get the best of me, if I'm supposed to wait an hour and I wait 30 minutes and I think, you know what? I'm good. I shouldn't have to wait another 30 minutes. It's nearly there. Yeah, it's going to be warm. I can take it. And if I burn my taste buds, it's going to take a lot longer than 30 minutes for any food to taste right. Impatience leads to lasting damage. And the final idea that I want to point out is that we have to be ready when it's time. In John chapter 11, we see an amazing but a convicting story. You see, in John chapter 11, we see Mary and Martha. These are the same women that we've read about multiple times before. One of them is that they've had an argument because Jesus came to their house. And one of them is listening to Jesus while the other one's trying to get the house tidy and ready. And then they start arguing because why isn't she helping? Then again, we also see a story of Mary and how Mary had washed Jesus' feet with perfume and her tears and her hair. And so we know that there's a connection between Jesus and Mary and Martha, that they had a great friendship. Well, Mary and Martha's brother Lazarus was sick and he was dying. Now, this is also a great friend to Jesus. And so we see that Jesus promises them that the sickness would not end in death. But then Jesus stayed where he was for 2 more days, resting and preaching and teaching to those around him. By the time he finally went to Bethany where Lazarus was, it would take a day's journey. And when he got there, Lazarus was dead for 4 days. If you had been here sooner, if you had just been here sooner, those are the first words that Jesus hears. Those are the first words that Martha says to Jesus when she saw him. And you think to yourself, yeah, he's dead. He's been dead for a while. And that's done. She wasn't ready for what was about to happen next. You see, Jesus, a few verses later, calls out to Lazarus to walk out of the tomb. And Lazarus walks out a healthy and a living man. You see, what looks like too late for us is right on time for God. The truth is that Jesus delayed himself intentionally so that God could get a greater glory through a resurrection rather than a healing. They knew Jesus could heal. They've seen it time and time again. Stories of Jesus' healing, people knew that he had that power. And so they thought, well, our friend's only a day's journey away, and he can fix this. He can help us. So let's get him down here. Now, if it's me, if I have the ability to heal my friend and I'm a day's journey away, by all means, I'm headed there right now. But Jesus, I love it. He knows what can get God greater glory. And so that's like baking a pie and going through all the trouble and then saying, well, if it would have been ready sooner, I would eat it. But it took too long. You get to looking at your watch and you're like, man, I got to go to bed soon. I don't know if it's worth it. I thought this was going to be faster. I didn't think I was going to have to let it sit for like 2 hours. I'm not hungry for it anymore. It's too late. I can't be eating this late. And then you wrap it up in foil and you put it in the fridge to have it the next few days. But when you have it, that pie won't taste the same because it's best when it's fresh. If we're like Mary and Martha, if we aren't ready when it's done, how can we enjoy it at its best? You see, when God finally says, here, it's ready, you won't have to force it. You can just enjoy the blessings. You can just enjoy the miracle. And so I know I hit quite a few stories today, but that's because I feel like so many of us can relate to them. Now, maybe we don't relate to every single one, but I'm willing to bet that there's a lot of us in this room, in the chapel, that you relate to at least one of those stories. And so maybe you feel like David. God has given you a promise for your future. Maybe it's your career. And you've been like David out in the wilderness saying, God, what happened? God, is this still happening? God, was this a joke? Like, what you said I was gonna get here, and I'm still stuck in this cave. I'm still stuck in this wilderness. I'm seeing everyone around me get what you've promised. I'm seeing them get to their future, their job, their whatever it may be. But I'm still stuck here. God, have you forgotten? When will I get where you promised me? And if that's you, whether you're in here in the chapel, I just ask that you would take a moment, just stand to your feet because we want to pray with you. But just if that's you, if you feel like you relate to David at all, just stand for just a bit. Okay, once you stand up, stay standing. Maybe you feel like Moses. You have a passion inside of you, a burden for those around you. It's just overwhelming. A passion for your community. You know that you've been called to do something, but you just don't know how you're going to do it. You're trying to find the purpose that God has called you for. Maybe you're waiting for your moment at the burning bush. And maybe you're sitting there thinking, well, if I just maybe step down this road, maybe I can get there. Maybe if I try this, maybe I can find this purpose. Don't be like Moses. Don't jump the gun. Give it time. Let God prepare you. Let God prepare you so that way when he calls you, you're ready to go. You don't have to live in exile. You don't have to live through the punishments. But if that's you and you feel like Moses, this overwhelming desire to help those around you, but you just don't know how you're going to do it or what you're going to do with this passion, would you just stand to your feet? Maybe you're like Abraham and Sarah. God has promised you a family. God has promised you a spouse. God has promised you a child. And time again, you're sitting here thinking, well, I've been waiting, but I haven't found that woman for me. I've been waiting, but I haven't found that man for me. God, you told me that I would have a husband. God, you told me that I would have a wife. And here I am sitting here thinking, is it ever going to happen? Maybe you've been on some dates, or maybe you've been waiting to have a date and you're saying, God, you know that I want this. You promised me a family, but I'm still sitting here alone. Where do I go? What do I do? Or maybe you're like Abraham and Sarah and the other way, and you're sitting there saying, God, you promised us a child. We've been wanting to grow our family, and we've been trying, and we haven't succeeded, and we've been seeing doctors and specialists. We've been sending cries up to God, up to heaven. God, where's my child? God, I'm getting discouraged. Don't let your impatience get the best of you. Don't give up on the promise. It's still on its way. But maybe you relate to Abraham and Sarah. If that's you, just take a moment and stand. Don't give up. Maybe you're like Lazarus. You're waiting on God's power to show up in your life. Maybe you've gotten a diagnosis, or someone in your family has gotten a diagnosis, and you're pleading for healing, saying, God, I've seen you do it time and time again. I've read the stories. I've heard how you have this power. We could really use you to show up right now. Maybe your family needs a miracle. Maybe your marriage needs a miracle. Maybe your finances need a miracle, and you're saying, God, I don't know how I'm going to make it. God, I don't know if I can hold on much longer. And you're saying, God, I need your power. Can you just show up in my life? Don't give up. Maybe you're like Mary and Martha, and you're saying, God, if you had only shown up sooner, if you had only heard my cries earlier, if you would have started working sooner, I wouldn't be where I'm at now. Maybe you're like Mary and Martha, and you're looking at this promise that God has given you, and it looks dead. God promised that Lazarus' sickness would end in death, and he died. And to Mary and Martha, that promise looked dead. To Mary and Martha, there was no hope. But what looks dead to us still has a pulse for God. So if that's your promise, and you're saying, God, I need your power. God, I need you to speak life into this. Don't give up. God's still working. God's power will come through. Stay ready. God's working on something. So for those of you that are standing, I would just ask that you would step out into the aisles and just make your way to the altar so that way we can pray with you, pray for you. Begin to pray for patience, that you wouldn't let your impatience get the best of you. Begin to pray for favor and for this passion to not engulf you. Begin to pray for God's power to show up in your life. Begin to pray that you see the path that leads to your future that God has promised you. Because I guarantee you, if God has promised you it, it's going to happen. Just don't give up. Hold on for a little longer. If that's you and you stood up.